US President has reaffirmed his support for Japan in its row over disputed islands with China. But following talks with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe, Barack Obama also warned against any escalation and wants to see a peaceful resolution. The US leader has kicked off his week-long tour of Asia in Japan.
A lavish ceremony at the Imperial Palace, fit for the first US president on a full state visit in 18 years. Barack Obama sat down with Japan's emperor before getting down to real business. Regional security and trade topped the agenda for his meeting with Prime Minister Shinzo Abe.
Your tour of Asia this time reaffirms the U.S.'s rebalancing policy, a commitment to placing more importance to this region.
Washington is eager to convince its Asian allies that it's serious about the regional stability. The U.S.'s seeming inability to rein in Russia over Ukraine got some in the region worried, especially those with territorial disputes with China.
And let me reiterate that our treaty commitment to Japan's security is absolute, and Article 5 covers all territories under Japan's administration, including the Senkaku Islands.
The dispute over the tiny and remote islet has plunged Japan's relations with China to the lowest point in years, adding to regional tensions caused by North Korea's nuclear ambitions. On the economic front, the two leaders failed to agree on a new multi-nation trade deal. Negotiations over the Trans-Pacific Partnership have been difficult, partly because of Japan's reluctance to open its agriculture market.
Now, let's get more from Alessio Palatano, a lecturer in war studies at King's College London. Thank you very much for joining us. Can you outline for us why Japan is so important to the US?
Well, Japan is at the centre of the pivot. If I could, I would say it's the pivot of the pivot in many ways. The basis and the long-standing nature of the cooperation between the two partners stands at the very heart of the Pacific nature in military and strategic terms of the United States. So from this point of view, it is essential to have a serious discussion, a serious conversation between the two leaders insofar as how to renew the alliance and how to develop a common view as to what Japan's contribution to the alliance as the United States is rebalancing towards the region is going to be like. And from what you've heard, do you think they've done a good job of that so far? I think a core element of this story was to reassure Japan on the one hand in order to buy political leverage. And I think that's exactly what happened. The specific statement about the US-Japan security alliance, including the disputed Senkaku Islands, known in China as Diaoyu, was very important and yet very symbolic, because on one hand, it's just restating an existing policy, but it's coming from the highest authority, the president himself, during an official state visit. That, I think, was very important to reassure politicians and counterparts in Japan, but at the same time, important also to allow the United States to bring Japan to have serious discussion about components like the Trans-Pacific Partnership, particularly the aspects about agricultural markets and automobile markets, which have represented some sort of a factor that slowed down the possibility to implement these agreements. But it's a fine line, isn't it, that Barack Obama is walking here? He needs to back his ally, but also not fall out and go offside with China. Absolutely. But at the same time, I think there is nothing really, insofar as the reassurance component, it really was directed towards the Japanese and to a lesser extent in China. I don't think anybody in Beijing felt particularly shaken by the statement itself. As I said, it's a policy that has been in place since December 2012, when the Congress approved an amendment that clarified at that point specifically. So here the question really revolved around how to reassure, and by the way, this is going to happen most likely also in South Korea, the next stop in Obama's trip to Asia. This is about reassuring allies in the region that have been there for a long time and sort of use this reassurance as a platform to launch more serious discussion about how these allies are going to play and make a contribution to allow the United States to retain its dominant position in the region. And more generally, can you update us on Chinese expansionism in the region, what Japan and other countries are up against? Well, I think at the moment what we are looking is a country that, in light of the important economic growth of the past decade and a half, it's filling it into important sort of military gaps by upgrading and modernizing its military. And while the growth is impressive, still there is a degree of distance. Still the gap is there insofar as, for example, in comparative terms of what the Japanese or the Koreans have filled in terms of quality of the assets and their ability to work in an integrated fashion with their United States counterparts. That being said, I think the most important elements in this story are two different levels. On one level, Chinese authorities have proved that they are willing to use force to a degree to present their requests and to back up their claims. On the other hand, over the past 3-4 months, we've seen a certain shift and certainly a decrease in the number of Chinese activities, which suggests there is an element of political opening to re-establish discussion with the partners in the region.
Alessio Palatano, thank you very much for your analysis and for joining us here on France 24.